Welcome, everyone, to the Healing Power of Plants. I'm Lauren Almquist, founder of Heartspace Herbals and Garden Design, and I'm so happy to be here today with Salima Harleston Lust. Salima is a wife, mother, and co-founder of Iwilla Remedy. As a clinical herbalist and medical astrologer and spiritual teacher, she helps people heal from trauma and reclaim their power through plant medicine, self-care, and mindfulness. She offers workshops and leads Iwilla Remedy's online mentorship program, Herbal Medicine for the Soul, using the Calypso healing method. Welcome, Salima, to the show. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Um, I wonder if we could. So today we're going to be talking about, receiving plant wisdom and practicing inspired action. Like what do we do, once we receive that wisdom or that information, however we receive it, how do we put that into practice, into inspired action? And I'd love to start out with just a little bit about yourself, anything you'd like to share about either how you came to this plant journey or, what you're doing right now, like what most lights you up, anything, little tidbit that you want to share with our audience.
Thank you. Yeah, so I came into plants from my own healing journey where I was struggling with chronic digestive issues, really bad periods, all this musculoskeletal pain that I was going to the chiropractor for 3 times a week. And that was just kind of posed as my only solution for the rest of my life. And I was in my 20s. And it was actually my wife, Tammy, who was having her own health issues and kind of decided we can't keep spinning our wheels. And it was through our literally our first bottle of lavender essential oil that our plant path completely opened up and transformed our lives. And we have been doing it ever since. And I started to see real results in some of the health issues that I was having. And I don't have them anymore. So that was over 15 years ago. I definitely feel better now in my 40s than I did in my 20s. And I say this a lot that plants literally helped me save my life. So we have all of the therapeutic benefits that we can receive from plants, but it was really kind of the unlocking of the emotional hardness, the mental spirals that I didn't have tools for, that plants really helped me soften and open up to. And that's when at the heart of my healing was through plants addressing the childhood trauma that I had faced. It's I never would have healed without that. It would have just
Right.
kind of been stayed physical and some, temporary relief in the physical body, but it was really the invitation to do that deeper inner healing work that was the key that opened
Mm.
up a whole new path, really.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I love that you brought up opening up all the not, it's not just the physical, it's the, kind of the multi dimensions of us. I sometimes talk about plants as multi-dimensional beings, and we are multi-dimensional beings. So I'd love to hear you talk about, or anything you want to share about how to quiet the mental noise and attune your senses to even connect with plants. I know everyone kind of has a different way, but like how would you guide someone to start that process?
There's a quote that I'm probably going to butcher, but it basically says that in humans, our only job really is to control the mind. And if you study all the kind of different mystical teachings, spiritual teachings, even religious teachings, when you get to the core, it's can we control our mind? And plants help us. If we need that physical relief, plants can help us get that physical relief. And then there's the invitation of what are we doing in our mental and emotional spaces when we have that relief? And that's where I deeply believe that having some form of meditation practice, you don't have to sit cross-legged with a mudra if you don't want to. You can sit in a chair. It's about quiet time with self and what it does. It's not even about trying to still the mind. You're not going to fight your mind. We are meant to be stimulated, and so I don't think that it's a battle. I kind of visualize it as an assembly line, that these are the thoughts that are going across the mind. And through that deliberate, quiet time, there's more spaciousness between the thoughts. And that's the practice. Can we practice having spaciousness between our thoughts and not attaching to them? But when you do, go back to whatever it is that you're focusing on. If it's your breath, if it's the air conditioner, if it's music, if it's just simply being, I think that's where we can really learn how to distinguish our worry from our peace. That's how we can start to listen to what that inner voice actually looks like. But that first step is simply that willingness to sit and be still with oneself.
Mhm.
And I've definitely, we have plants that give us the physical relief. And then we also have plants that give us that mental relief, skull cap,
Blue vervain.
appropriately named, right? Blue vervain that help us quiet our nervous systems. But then it's the invitation. I always like to think about things as if we are asking for something, what is then the change that's required in order to receive the answer or to receive the solution or to receive the change? We can't just say, I want peace, but still operate in a chaotic way. And so, one of the first things that we have to do is get comfortable just sitting with ourselves and witnessing what happens in our minds and creating that spaciousness. And then there's also that practice of like, you're the thinker. You can change your thoughts. You do not have to focus on the things that you were focusing on. And that's another invitation into relief, especially because we have 60 to 70,000 thoughts per day. Most of them are repetitive. At any moment, at any point of the day, you can tell yourself, I don't want to think about that anymore, especially if you can't change it, but something that happened in the past. Why continue to keep that record on a record player? And so it's like that part of that's the like spiritual part of like, this is how we create neural pathways when we choose to think different thoughts.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so much of what you said I resonate with, especially, I think that's why I love blue vervain so much. It's like I mean, I like skullcap too, but blue vervain is like very strong for me because it just gives me, I mean, I have such a relationship with it over time, but it gives me that little help to calm the repetitive thoughts and create that spaciousness that you're talking about. That is so important. And what I was also hearing a little bit in what you're saying is like the practice of it. It's not about, oh, we're gonna like banish these thoughts or I mean, we have thoughts. We will continue to have thoughts. And, just pointing out like the thinker, like the who is observing this? Like we are observing this. So I love that. And then we were talking a little bit about like so let's say you're able to quiet the mind or observe the mind, let's say, and detach a little bit and have a little bit of spaciousness. What do we do with that then? Like once we're okay, we received some wisdom, we received or even just a nudge, let's say. We received a nudge. What do we do with that? How do we move forward?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of things. One, we create that spaciousness and we really start to feel like that ease in our bodies, but that spaciousness in our mental conversation. Questions that we are asking all the time, like those answers begin to rise to the surface. And that's that intuitive knowing where it's like, you know, that when you hear something or see something, like when it's coming from your intuitive body, you know when that's the answer to something that you've been asking for, or you know when that's the instruction that you need to take. Uh, I think a part of it is not convincing yourself out of it because you're afraid. And so I can use myself as an example, like when it came to realizing that it was a childhood trauma that I really needed to heal because repressed memories were rising to the surface. And once they did, honestly, I was relieved because I was like, I have been operating in this way and not knowing why. Like, why am I always in fight or flight? Why am I so shut down? Why am I like this? Why am I being called the mean girl? I'm like, I know this is not who I am, but why? And when I finally understood what had happened in my past, I was really relieved. And then my next question then becomes, it's a natural next question. I don't even have to say it out loud. It's like, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to go through this healing process? And I knew that one of the things that I needed to work on was my voice. I never spoke this much. As much as I talk now, there was no way. And anytime I would think about like sharing something personal, it didn't have to be related to childhood, just anything, my throat would literally just lock up and all of the anxiety in the belly, the throat locked up and palms are sweating just to speak. It could be simple, like, what's your name? Just to speak. And so I knew that my next step was saying, you have to work on your voice. And that's the whisper. And it's scary, right? So it's like there's that gap between this is a pattern that I have been living in. and it's very uncomfortable. I don't want to live it anymore. I have to do work in order to close this gap. And I think this is a lot where people, they have the knowing, but they don't necessarily have the courage to do the work that requires to fill the gap. And the courage and confidence build when you're in motion. They are not going to just suddenly develop inside of you while you're doing nothing to change it. And so I remember accepting that, like, okay, this is my instructions. I need to work on my voice. And then the beautiful thing in the way that, like, spirit or the universe or source, whatever you want to call it, works with us is that it gives you the circumstances that you need in order to close your gap. And so I started having these, being in these really organic conversations where I would hear that whisper, like, Salima, now it's time for you to talk. It's time for you to share your story and all of the things, all the triggers, all the reactions, everything happens inside. I could be looking like perfectly normal, like, but inside I'm going crazy. And it's that, okay, I trust what has been rising for me. I'm gonna move through the throat closing, the gut going crazy, the sweat. I mean, you could like create a cartoon animation around this. That would be hilarious. Like, why are you sweating? Because I have to talk. And then I started talking. And it's like, that's the work. That's the work, is to take that inspired action. And then you realize actually how you're supported and safe inside of that, inside of doing that action. And it kept happening where it was like, then a couple weeks later, same moment, same triggers to a lesser degree. Talk, share your story. My world doesn't blow up. I'm still here. I'm still safe. And my body is like, okay, we're cool. We're cool. And then, and the gap, that's literally you witnessing you close your own gap, but it's going to take you doing physical action as a human being in your body.
Thank you for sharing that. And like, it's so well. I mean, I think we could all relate to having that thing of like, oh, okay, I need to work on this, or, this is my next step, maybe, or maybe I don't even know what it looks like, but you have a feeling, a nudge. And I love what you described. I'm going to follow up on that. Like, it's not like instruction, here's your gap, you close it, boom, you're done. I mean, it's never like that, right? And so I
Never.
think I love the way you described and like illustrated for our listeners, like it's incremental and it's a process. And even the wisdom or the instructions that you receive may not be clear. Like I would be someone to be like, okay, wait, so how do I work on my voice? What do I do? Instead of like trusting, like you said, but then like through the choice to take that inspired action, which is scary. It can be, it's, you do need, it sounds like you do need to have the intention there of knowing, okay, this is what I'm working on. And it's work because it's new. It's something that you're trying on. And I think, you're speaking to how plants can be really good as like helping us kind of nudge us forward or nudge us in a direction that can help us. So thank you for describing it that way. I know one of the things we talking about was establishing a daily practice that helps us to trust the inspired action, or help trust what comes through, but also the inspired action that we might take. So I'd love for us to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any way that I could have done any of the things that I have done to like heal body and trauma without having some sort of practice.
Yeah.
And what I encourage, like all of my herbal medicine for the soul students, I really want people to get to this place where you're developing a practice for yourself, even if it's as simple as for the first 15 minutes of the day, I am going to sit with myself. You can call that meditation, you can call it reflection, you can call it journaling, you can call it gratitude. Gratitude's really helpful. It can be as simple as that. And noticing, like, do it for 2 weeks consistently and then stop for 2 weeks and don't change anything else. And
Mm,
inevitably, people will feel the difference between when they're consistent with their practice and how, like, life has more ease. You're making more aligned decisions for yourself. You're slowing down. You're being deliberate. You're more joyful. You're like, your mood is lifted. And then when you stop, all the stuff starts happening again. You start reacting again. And I think that is honestly the biggest teacher of why people need to have a practice, because now you have the example in your own life of this works. Now, the discovery of what needs to be included in your practice, I think people can get really hard on themselves when they're thinking, like, well, I start this and then I stop and I'm not consistent with it. And I think that that's just the discovery phase. Don't stop trying new things. Something is going to click. So, a part of my practice is I meditate every day, probably 3 times a day. I am a big believer in affirmations because I don't want my mind to get out of control. So when I am like I'm thinking of like I want to think about certain things. So if I'm not deliberate about what I'm thinking about, I will just start thinking about my affirmations. And my affirmation of the season is, and I do it with box breathing. So it's like I'm calm and confident, capable and creative, connected, loved, safe, and abundant. And I'll just say that to myself throughout the day whenever I don't want to like be caught into thinking about something else, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then I always have my infusions. So plants are a huge part of my practice. So it's infusions. I always got an herb I'm carrying around somewhere. Usually it's in my bra. So this is John the Conqueror root. There's not a, like I start my day with cayenne pepper, bacopa, and amla. So I'm like always consuming plants and working with them. And then sometimes there also will be times where I will well, I'll communicate with them like they're guides. Like they're guides, they're teachers, they're among us. Like I want to be embraced and supported by the plants. So even if I'm not outside, I might call in the energy of the pecan tree because we have one right outside of our office. And
Mhm.
sometimes my meditation practice will be guide writing. So it's like you get into your meditative space or your calm space, and then I'm calling in the energy of whatever plant I want to work with or hear from. And then I may ask a question and just write down what comes through. And I might do pages and pages of that through a season. So that's on and off. But there's always something every day that helps me stay grounded and centered inside of myself and helps me not mentally spiral.
Yeah. That's beautiful, and I love what you said about, don't be hard on yourself, like, if you stop and start, like, that's part of the discovery phase, so, and it's gonna look a little bit different for everyone, so I love, like, opening up that space to be curious and to try things out and not have it be like, "Oh, you have to do it this way," or "You have to do it for this many minutes and this many times," like, you find what is good for you, and yeah, I know that, like, I always think about, like, habits, and in some ways it, like, starts to become a self I don't not self-fulfilling, but, like, self-motivating habit. I love what you said about the 2 weeks trying, whether it's 5 minutes a day, whatever you can do, whatever works for you for 2 weeks straight, and then not. Like, I never even thought of doing that and just because that's, like, such a visceral experience of practice. And that's something really anyone can do, and if you miss a day in your 2 weeks, just do it the next day, like, just have that intention. So I love that idea of being able to experience the difference, in your own body and for yourself to see what works. Yeah, I find that, like, that's why I like to when it's gardening season, that's like it's almost like I gotta go and, like, see the plants and tend the plants, although they're fine on their own too, but, so it like that kind of creates that practice. But I do talk to a lot of people that say, "Well, I wanna go deeper, but I don't have time," or, I'm working, this many jobs and it's hard. And, what I say is like, "Yes, and there's, what if you took 5 minutes a day?" We all brush our teeth morning and night. We all, like pack it on to something and find what works for you. So I love how you highlighted that. Um, and what would you say to someone that is on the beginning of like kind of their journey of like really connecting and listening to whatever comes through from the plants? And you touched on this a little bit, but I'd love to go a little deeper. Like when people say, "Well, I don't know if it's just me or the plant," or you spoke into that, like trying to correct yourself or something like that. But what do you say to people that are in that space?
Yeah, I mean, that's a part of the journey within the practice. And I kind of want to go back to your other point
Yeah.
where it's like we don't have time for
Mm,
ourselves and really invite people to interrogate that. This planet is billions of years old, and we are here maybe 90 years. And so what do you wanna do with your 90 years, with your 80 years, your 90 years? Like, you to interrogate the idea that you can't give yourself 15 minutes a day is worth reflecting on. And then also, I think that what people will see in, turning the practice on and turning it off, comparing the 2 experiences is that the practice is renewal. It's renewing, it's refreshing, it's invigorating, it's actually giving you the energy that you need in order to do and accomplish and be productive in and serve in all of the ways that you want to do. So I often find that people are more leaning towards burnout and exhaustion and overdoing and people pleasing and not closing their gap because they don't have a practice. Like the practice is actually the heart of it. And it shouldn't feel like pouring into you shouldn't feel like labor. That's
Mm,
another thing. That's another note to kind of like interrogate. Why does that feel like labor? These records likely go back to our childhoods and like what was modeled for us or not. Right. And so it's okay, but it's just like recognize when
mm.
that record that you're not a priority, that you don't deserve love, that you don't deserve care and attention and time and reflection. Somewhere along your journey that got put on the record player and it's okay, but now it's time to take that off because it's not sustainable otherwise. And then the trust comes with the trust in what's the voice, where are these instructions coming from? Is it from you, Mimosa? Is it from my anxiety? Is it from my doubt? It should always feel like ease. It should always Your intuition is never going to tell you to do something dumb. Okay? There's no okey dokes from the universe. There's no rug getting pulled from under you. There's no, "Oh, I gotcha." There's no traps. We come from an unconditionally loving source, whatever we want to call that. And so it has to feel like ease and like a next right step. So not a leap, right? Like I'm trying to think of what would have been way too far-fetched for when I knew I had to do my voice work, knowing that I need to work on my voice, and then having these organic conversations kind of emerge and sharing. Those were one-on-one. A leap that would have been way too far-fetched would have been like, "Okay, Salima, now go speak on Madison Square Garden stage." It's like, "Okay, that's your that's your ego talking or your anxiety. Like, there's no way. That's not a next right step. That's not a natural step." So I think that those are ways to kind of qualify, but then also like pay attention to doing it. Do it. Pay attention to how you feel afterwards. And sometimes it doesn't make sense. Like I have another example of before I launched my mentorship program, Herbal Medicine for the Soul, and I was really seeking clarity. I had gotten the confirmation a couple of times. It's like, okay, you need to build this program. I'm like, "Do, do, 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 do." Like, who, me? But I kept hearing it. And so the pressure is building, but I really didn't feel I didn't feel certain or confident. And so my next step was just like, just go to the altar. So go to your altar, whatever your sacred place is, just do that every day. And I did that literally every day for a year. And in that space, I would ask, I'm like, what's my instruction for today? And
Mm,
sometimes it would be go to a yoga class. Sometimes it would be make a blend. Sometimes like it wasn't the same thing every day, but I was committed to taking the one action and seeing what happens.
yeah.
And seeing what happens. And it was a very beautiful process. And like a lot of the things that that's kind of when I feel like I earned my like you're an herbalist because I was also caring for I had a newborn too. So it's like, oh, all the medicine that he needed and like all the things for the family, the dynamic and the both physical, but like the shift in a family when you have a baby, all of those things, a lot of those instructions kind of like came out of that time. And I was like, oh, okay. But it wasn't until I was looking back that I understood why each instruction was a little bit different every day. Like there was a deliberate kind of, I don't know, putting things together that was happening. But the puzzle pieces didn't make sense until the puzzle was complete. And I was like, oh, got it.
That's so awesome. Yeah, like, I think a lot of us, myself included, like, I wanna kinda know, like, okay, what are the steps? What's it gonna look like exactly? Now I kind of realize, okay, that's something my mind likes sometimes, but what you're describing is very doable. is, that one step, and that, like, highlights again the practice, like, committing to the practice. You're not committing to, like, a project plan of how to build a course. You're
Right.
committed, "Okay, I'm gonna show up every day. I'm going to take this time. I'm going to create this time for myself." And I wanna highlight what you said because I wanna write it down, like, inquiring or becoming curious about why is giving yourself time or slowing down or self-care, why does that feel like labor? Such a beautiful inquiry. And there, it's not a judgment. It's like, "Oh, that's interesting." And then, like, inquiring about that. So beautiful, and, like, so much that we can learn even simply in the process of developing a practice for ourselves. And it might be uncomfortable at times, because it's new, but yeah, I just love, that putting really into clear, in so clearly stating, like, that daily or however often practice of showing up and following the steps one by one, even if you don't know exactly what it's gonna, I mean, that's part of the mystery, that's part of the trust. And I've been talking about trust with some other folks, and, talking about that, it's a risk. It's not knowing, it's stepping forward with not knowing exactly what's gonna happen, and then we get back to that safety and try, "Okay, I'm still here, it's okay." And I know that plants have such a beautiful way of supporting us and being almost like witness to us as younger siblings, perhaps, of plants. They're like,
Yeah.
"Okay, try again, it's
Yeah.
alright."
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you for sharing all that. And I know you have a free gift. I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit if you'd like, the Path of Possibility ebook.
Yeah. Oh, I'd love to talk about it. So the path of possibility is something I wrote a couple of years ago, and I like to weave in like the connection with plants. And so it's thinking about what in working with specific plants, what I learned and how that relates to like life. Like what brought me to this conclusion and how did the plant help? So it's a balance of like all of the ways in which I speak and teach, where it's a little bit of spiritual, it's a little bit of like the plan and the science, but it's like, how does it actually integrate in life and what does that look like? So it's a daily, it's meant to be, yeah, kind of like read one a day and
Mm,
see how you feel.
beautiful. It's a beautiful way to, like, start a practice or, start just that daily, showing up. And so beautiful. Thank you for that offering. And if people want to, follow your work or find you, what's the best way to do that?
Yes, we are at iwillaRemedy.com. So IWILLA remedy.com. And Instagram is probably where I post the most. I'm trying to get our YouTube up too. So
Cool.
subscribe on YouTube. But we're at Iwilla Remedy on all of the platforms. But Instagram and YouTube are what we're giving most priority to.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you again. I always struggle to close these conversations because I just really enjoy talking with you, and I hope we get to talk again. But thank you
Uh,
so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation. And I hope everyone really enjoys the summit. Thank you.